should see something that says, all right, we are now streaming live. And let me see if this one's on. This one's on. All right, and one more. Here we go. All right, good morning. Happy Friday. There we go. Yes, today's Friday. Today I have a good friend, an old neighbor. I want to say we met, must be like 2013,
12.
12 or 13. Natalie Koch, you're a cyclist, a professor, and currently hiding in the woods.
Yes.
So I kind of gave everybody a very brief background about you earlier this week. Just you have type 1 diabetes, but you were diagnosed was 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
7 years ago, so in 2013.
All right. Yeah, time kind of flies.
Yes.
So one of the things that, we talked about probably the last time that we rode together was how you've completely changed your entire diet and lifestyle, but you've done all of the research pretty much on your own to figure out exactly what was best for you, but then there just wasn't a ton of information available for an adult diagnosed type 1 diabetic who's also a high level athlete. Are you still a pro cyclist?
Yeah, I haven't been racing that much in the last year because I've been traveling nonstop, but yes, I'm still riding with Team Type 1.
Team Type 1. Yeah. So if you could you give everybody just a little bit of background as far as when I had emailed you, who you are, and then more importantly, like how because you still ride a lot. So how you manage to balance both ends of it. You're a full-time professor, you do a ton of research literally in other parts of the world. So how do you balance all of it together?
Yeah. So let's see. I just a little bit of background on how I came to this sport. When I was in college, I was a rower, and I think that was a really important place for me to figure out my relationship with working and my sort of academic life and sport. And one of the first things I noticed when I first started rowing up in New Hampshire is that it made doing my work a lot easier if I actually would get out all that excess energy from the sport component. So I saw pretty early on that I really needed that balance in order to be functional in terms of my academic and work life. I may or may not be hyperactive. So getting some of that energy out early on is something that I've found to be really important. So then when I finished undergrad, I then sort of didn't have a sport to do because I went on to graduate school, and if you rowed varsity as an undergrad, you were not allowed to participate in even the club sports of rowing at the various universities I went to. So I needed a new sport, and cycling was where I landed. And so this is all pre-diabetes, right? And I was just still sort of figuring out how to balance the exercise and energy component and my work. So cycling was really a good way for me to get that activity level up. And also, I think, I have really depressive tendencies when I can't do sport. So that was a really important way for me to come back to and get, my mental health in order again as well, by starting cycling. So when I got into the sport, it was my first year of grad school at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and I saw the how important that was for me. And again, as I say, maintaining my mental health and just being able to continue my work. And so I decided pretty early on. I got a coach really early on, like from the first couple of months that I started riding, and I just got on a very rigid training schedule. And so my coach would give me, the weekly workouts. And then eventually I started racing and all these other pieces to sort of work toward and to structure my day. So I decided, like from the beginning, that when I was in graduate school in Boulder, that sport would be my number one priority. Everything else could fall around that. My work and everything I could make the time for that, but I had to have that structure in my day related to the sport component in order to, make sure that I didn't let other things in life kind of derail that, right? Because when you have a job that can fill every crevice of every day, if you let it, it will. Um, at least if you're a workaholic like me. So yeah, I said, okay, I need the structure of the sport to keep me focused and to not let my job take over the rest of my life. So those were habits also that I developed then in graduate school and figured out, okay, this is a way to structure my whole approach to things. And frankly, that was also then when I got a job at Syracuse and I moved to Syracuse University. I made an unequivocal promise to myself that I would not give up cycling, that I would maintain that same attitude of sport is number one. Everything else can fall around that. Because again, I saw what happened to me and my mental health and my work balance if I didn't do that. So I really just came in with that major priority and let everything kind of fall around it. So then when I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, that was my first year at Syracuse. So February of my first year there. And it made it easier to already have developed these habits of structuring my day, of setting these priorities. And for me before, the priority of doing sport was to maintain my ability to work and be mentally healthy. But here now I had another element of my physical health with respect to the diabetes that was just, it fit within that bigger logic of I'm doing this for a greater purpose, which is, maintaining my blood sugar and ensuring that I'm living a healthy lifestyle. So in that sense, again, how I structure my time is really just coming down to having a very clear commitment to certain priorities that I've set out for myself long in advance of like any given day, right? I'm not having to constantly ask myself, is this important decision for me to make today? Because I've already made that commitment at the broader structural level.
Yeah.
Then in terms of just like the day-to-day actual pieces and doing my work, it also kind of this priority structure kind of filters down to the rest of my days. So in any given day, I have the fortune of the way that my job is structured. I can say, no matter what, I'm going to go ride my bike today. And I work my day around that. So I am rigid with myself, but I'm also flexible in the sense that, okay, today I thought it was going to be raining, so I thought I wasn't going to be riding my bike, but it's dry right now. So when we finish here, I'm going to go ride because like I can, and I don't want to sit at home while there's a chance to do that. Even if I wanted to do some riding, I can do that riding later. It might be raining later in the day, so that's totally fine. So in the day-to-day sense, that's still going to be my number one priority, to make sure I get the exercise in. Managing the diabetes and managing my blood sugar is really hard if I don't exercise in any given day. So I make, again, that commitment to myself. Then I would say the last sort of piece to the bigger thing is I do research, as you suggested, internationally. I do a lot of travels abroad. And recently I've been working largely in the Gulf countries, in Qatar and the UAE. Those are the two main places that I've been traveling. And there theoretically you could ride a bike, but I don't really have suicidal tendencies. So I've largely stayed off of the bike there. But I try to stay in places where I know I will have access to a gym, or in some cases I've brought goggles and a swimsuit so that I can at least do some kind of swimming workout if I can't get on a stationary bike or other things like that. So I try to structure my research travels and my actual stays, how I organize my visit, in a way that I can continue to do some kind of sport, because again, managing the diabetes is so hard without it. And then, as I mentioned before, there's really the bigger puzzle for all of this for me is the mental health side, and that has to be number one.
And I mean, I know you're from my favorite place, Tucson. Um,
Yes.
outside of Syracuse, I love Syracuse. Strange decisions. Um, and I know that you spent, like we were already talking about, you go back to Tucson, and Tucson is, I would say, I don't know if Tucson or Boulder, Colorado. I don't know which one. I think Tucson's bigger from a cyclist perspective. Boulder is bigger from a triathlon perspective.
Mm,
Um,
mhm.
but they both are endurance meccas in their own right. And obviously
Yeah.
that that along with beautiful weather every day makes it very easy to um, get your workouts in. But we've talked from the managing your diabetes perspective with riding and such. You typically will get your workouts done earlier in the day.
Mhm.
And every time that I've seen you out on the road, I usually leave the house when I'm, outside of quarantine at 7:30 in the morning. And you're out, when you lived in the city, so that's 10 miles south, 8 miles south over by my house, and you're usually going up Route 91 or going down Apulia Road.
Mhm.
So, do you find that by riding earlier in the day, is it one of those things like it's like, all right, I'm going to get it out of the way so then I can get work done? Or is it, because we've talked about from a managing diabetes perspective, it helps you by
Mhm.
getting the workout in earlier in the day. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, so I would say there's two reasons that I prefer to ride in the morning, and I really almost only ride in the morning unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance where I can't. So one thing is I'm just a morning person. So in the mornings, I feel most energized about the day and excited about doing things. So I like to take advantage of that. And the way that I often, especially in summer mornings, I'll try to get out as soon as the sun comes up. And if I can as well, I will often do a little bit of writing. So with like this summer, for example, I'm writing a book. So I might start by doing some of the writing, and then I'll get stuck and I will not necessarily know where I'm going to go, or I'll just feel bored, whatever. And then I can get on my bike. And meanwhile, all the stuff is sort of spinning in the background. So just getting a little bit of thinking started in the morning when I am, feeling most alert, and then getting on the bike can help that sort of transition to come back to the work a little bit later. So I think as a morning person, I want to do everything in the morning. The other piece then is the diabetes, as you mentioned. So what happens, or what I have found happens with the way that I manage my diabetes, is that if I exercise earlier, then the effect of sport and activity suppressing your blood sugar, or rather your body being able to use insulin more efficiently, that is it sort of tapers off, right? So when the effect is most immediate right after starting exercise, or right after you exercise, and then it sort of tapers over a period of time. So if I do that earlier in the day, then I kind of, during those waking hours and those working hours when I'm like really mostly stationary at my computer, then I'm still getting that benefit through much of that working day. So yeah, those would be the main two reasons that I prefer to get out in the morning. But obviously, there's certain like weather things that influence that. And I don't mind riding in a winter jacket early in the morning, and even knowing that it's going to be sunny in the afternoon. That to me doesn't really bother me. But if it's like 28 degrees, I might wait an hour.
Yeah. So that you can feel your feet. Um,
Yeah, that helps.
yeah, I just think that it's, now from like the nutrition side, um, you've done most of your own experimentation, as far as, because a traditional endurance diet and race day protocol would be high carb, tons of gels, a gel every, what's on the back of a goo, it says like a gel every
Every
30 minutes, I think.
45.
Yeah, I think they want you to do it every
Yeah.
30 minutes from a sales perspective. You go through twice as many.
Mm.
Um, and I used to tell athletes, every 45 minutes is when you want to make sure you're getting some carbs in. But are you still ketogenic? Because you were
Yeah,
talking
so
like,
I mean, I have a very different circumstance, I would say, than anybody who is not type 1, mostly because I take insulin. So I have to take insulin injections, which means that I control that dosing in a way that normal, like, or able-bodied people wouldn't be able to. So I'm simply working under a different set of circumstances in terms of that. So really, for me, when it comes to race day, I have to think a little bit less about the carbohydrates that I'm taking in and more about the amount of insulin that I'm going to take. And here also a big component of why this is relevant and why I have to think about the more chemical processes of this rather than just simply carbohydrates, is that things like adrenaline and growth hormone affect how your body uses insulin and how your cells react to insulin and how they do or don't take up sugar out of the bloodstream. So these are things I had to, as you mentioned before, I had to teach myself kind of the chemistry of this. But that is also something that most people are not normally measuring. What is your cortisol output, or what is your your adrenaline output? We have no way of knowing. I can only really judge that on the basis of how is my body reacting to the insulin, and that's how I have to think about it more so than just like the straight amount of carbs.
yeah. And I remember when we were talking about it, even having a race delayed, if
Oh.
you're sitting at a start line and a race is delayed 20 minutes, like especially from the adrenaline perspective, like, because anyone who's ever done a bike race, like you get into, whether you want to call it a corral, but you're sitting right behind the starting line, and as soon as everybody clips that for, their 1 foot in, all of a sudden, like, you get a little bit of that adrenaline. And then if it's
Mm,
like, well, we've got a delay for 20 minutes, it's like you get that small spike and then then you come back down. So now,
yeah.
just fine tuning that balance of like, okay, do I, how to, I've got to manage. It's one more thing that you have to be very conscious about, which I think
Yeah.
able-bodied person or someone without diabetes is going to just be like, seriously, like, this is, they're thinking more from like, Christ, I got to get out of
Right.
here. I got, I got
Right.
to mow the lawn this
Right.
afternoon. um,
Exactly. Well, yeah, and that's that to that point. I mean, I have to take insulin in different ways for different kinds of races. So for something like that, for a cyclocross race or a crit, anything in which you're really truly just running on adrenaline, I will often actually counterintuitively take extra insulin so that it can counteract that surge of adrenaline. So yeah, what you learn with type 1 is that your insulin has certain activity profiles, meaning over a period of time it works in a different way. So I have to take that into account. So a delay of 20 minutes, yeah, it could mean that my insulin starts kicking in before I've had that adrenaline surge, and then yeah, it's a problem. But that also means, and I think this is one thing I've been reflecting a lot on with the coronavirus stuff that's happening, something I've experienced a lot with my research in the post-Soviet world in Kazakhstan, for example, is that you always have to have a plan A, B, C, D, E, and F, right? You cannot just like, assume that things are going to work fine in any given circumstance, but you always have, okay, if this happens, if this happens, if this happens, then you have all those contingency plans. So one of the first times, that I experienced one of those delays in a cyclocross race, I was like, oh man. And then you make sure from then on, you always have an extra goo, even though you may not actually use it, just to be sure that you don't end up not being able to do the race simply because, there was a 10-minute or 15-minute delay.
Yeah. One of the things that I talk to a lot of clients about is, I think there's, anytime you have someone who, a lot of the people that I work with, come to me predominantly from the nutrition side, in they're completely healthy, healthy in air quotes, and they just have to really like curtail and like dial in their nutrition. And where when we take someone who has, like, you don't have a choice. If you want to be healthy, you have to pay very close attention to your nutrition. Same thing if someone has celiac disease. If they have a gluten product, they pay the price, whether it's through GI distress, vomiting, like hives, like they pay a price for that. A
Mhm.
normal bodied person or a quote unquote healthy person, like they'll have it and they'll be like, oh, feel like shit every time I have pizza, but I still like to have pizza. And there's not
Yeah.
enough of a consequence. And have you experienced since like having type 1, have you experienced any issues where you were like, okay, well, that was way too much insulin, or I got super lightheaded before the start of this event, or, if you're, I mean, how do you manage even when you're in, another country like Kazakhstan? I mean, it's
Mhm.
totally different circumstances over there. Do you find that it makes it managing type 1 harder in those
Yeah,
circumstances?
yeah, so I would say in terms of the diabetes, you start to learn your body over a period of time. So certainly within the first year, I felt like every single day I was just experimenting on my body. I felt like a lab rat, but I had to do it because you had to learn what works, what doesn't, and how your body reacts in certain ways. So it's gotten easier to be sure. But at the same time, life changes. I don't have a normal daily routine. Every day is completely different for me. So I'm always having to attend to how those shifts look, and what happens if you don't sleep enough at night, or when you take a transcontinental flight and you're dealing with a 10 or 12-hour time difference. Those sorts of things, again, I've figured out, okay, you take a week or two and you get adjusted, and your body starts to recalibrate and you learn this new pattern. But it does take a lot of just constant self-monitoring to make that, to just attend to how you're feeling and how your body's doing and how it's reacting to certain things. So I have the personal disposition that like I'm just comfortable doing that. I kind of enjoy doing that, and I'm just very like um, yeah, micromanaging of my own self. It also helps, obviously, that I have a continuous glucose monitor. So this monitor is telling me what my blood sugar is every couple of minutes. And I actually think that sometimes, if people without diabetes had this, it might actually be really useful for them, because like, okay, yeah, I eat this pizza and I feel like crap. I don't really know why, but whatever. Or drinking a huge glass of juice, something like that, right? And so I can actually see the data. I can see the numbers of what happens when you do that. Whereas, other people that don't have this technology can't necessarily see that. So then it just means just being more attentive to, okay, I get sick to my stomach when I do that. Maybe I should scale back and then see. And it just becomes a daily sort of experimentation with how your body reacts to things, with or without the glucose monitor data. Um, So in that sense, yeah, I think it is it's important to just have that ethos, but also, you know, at the broader level, I certainly see how people who have diabetes or other health issues, who just kind of defer the control of whatever condition it is that they have, and when you see the impacts on those people's lives, it really kind of hits home why you should do this. At least for me, you know, I think my brother's had a lot of health problems lately, and he also has type 1, and it just reaffirms to me that this is a really important thing. I don't want to have to be dealing with a lot of those complications later in life, and so it just gives me a bit more of a commitment to controlling it and being careful about it. But yeah, the question that you had about traveling internationally, obviously, all those things are things that you have to work out and think about carefully, long in advance. And it's another reason that I haven't been going and doing research in Central Asia very much recently, because I don't necessarily trust the health system. If I were to go, it would be for a shorter period of time. And you know, in the Gulf countries, they happen to have a lot of diabetes. They happen to know how to deal with it. So I feel much more comfortable and safer in those kinds of contexts, working with the disease and being there. It helps certainly to be in that kind of environment. So those are just bigger structural things that you have to think of. And you know, I think everybody should be thinking of them as well. It's just that it is, as you suggest, it's a little bit more immediate of a response for me if I don't do it.
Yeah, cool. All right, I don't want to hold you up too much. So I always ask people, what are what are some things that you find, like what are some tips that you'd give to if someone was like, you know what, I'm I'm just, I'm looking for that motivational piece. Um, they're looking for something to get them either off the couch or out of bed. What are some things that I mean, obviously you touched on using exercise to help with your mental health, as well as your
Mhm.
physical health. But what are some other, like, what would you say from like a motivational perspective you use sport as, or your nutrition as, to help kind of like cope with, especially with everything that we have going on now?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing for me, and you know, I've heard some motivational speakers talk about this as well, is this idea of giving yourself a particular structure, so that you're not every day waking up and having to make the choice, should I go ride my bike or not? Like, once you've established a routine and a structure and a set of rules for yourself, it becomes a lot easier because you don't have to have that conversation with yourself, you know. And it just makes it a lot easier to just say, this is the routine, this is how this works, and this is how my day is going to work. And that structure can come from any way that you want to think about it, but for me, as I said before, it's been largely about setting a priority and actually sitting down and thinking to myself, what are my priorities in life? My priority on a day-to-day basis is to have my blood sugar under control and to feel good. And I know what it takes to get there. So if that's my number one priority, then what are the steps that I need to take? And then once you kind of map that out, then it's easy to just keep that structure in place to keep you going, because you don't have to question your priorities on a daily basis. So, you know, as I said, when I got to Syracuse, I made that promise to myself, and it may sound cheesy to some, but you know, it was what I needed to do to hold myself accountable, because I knew that nobody else would. And if I make a promise to myself, then like who else am I serving, right? I should hold myself to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So, I mean,
Okay.
that kind of ties in. One of the big things I always talk about is habit formation. Um,
Mhm.
and again, and that's a lot of it is, you make a habit of, these are my priorities. This is how my life is going to go. I do a program. I follow a program that, it's quite simple. It's, you follow a diet, you do two 45-minute workouts, no alcohol, no cheat meals. drink water, 10 pages of reading every day. First thing I do as soon as I get up is I sit down, I drink my 16 ounces of water, read my 10 pages, regardless. Like it's,
Yeah.
before I do it, before I even go over and start making coffee or start making breakfast, because I know that if I don't, then it's like the boys get up and they, like I was in the middle of a workout, they woke up. So it's like pause the workout, come upstairs,
Mhm.
take care of them, get them breakfast, and then I go over and I finish the rest of my workout. And it's like I can't like stop reading something, get them going, and then like you gotta.
Mhm.
So I'm like the reading for me is it's like get it out of the way first thing, and then I know I can manage
Mhm.
my workouts around them. Um,
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah,
and the other thing I think, just to go back to the point about the coronavirus and the changed circumstances, that I've found is easier for me as somebody who I have to constantly shake up my routine. So, whether I'm in Syracuse or I'm in Arizona or I'm in the United Arab Emirates, I'm constantly going to all these different places. And so every time I make one of those changes, I have to shake up my routine. So I think having a routine like that is really good, but also just being open to realizing that, okay, for this period of time, that routine has to change. And I can go back to what it was like, my Syracuse routine when I get back to Syracuse or whenever the time is right. But for this period of time, I'm accepting that, okay, I will move with this. I have a new routine and we're going to go with that for now. And feeling comfortable doing that and not guilt tripping yourself for actually saying, circumstances have changed and I do need a new routine.
yeah, yeah. And I think that that's especially in this I don't know state that we're in, if you will, that a lot of people kind of you have like the two camps. Like one camp is like, I'm going to take advantage of this time and get all of those workouts that I never have time for in. And then you have the other side that's like, yeah, I'm going to take this and just undo
Yeah.
all of that work that I had done the previous 6 months or 10 years, whatever it is.
Hopefully no one listening to this.
Yes, better not be anyone listening to this. Awesome. All right. Well, we went to 8:30 today, so but I think it
Right.
was great. So we're gonna say goodbye to Facebook, and then we'll chat a little bit offline. So
Okay.
let me just go over
Sounds
here.
good. Thanks.
So yeah, thank you, Facebook. I'll check all the comments. I'll reply to everybody afterwards, because a lot of times doesn't. Facebook is usually pretty slow on the uptake with this stuff. So good morning, fellow bicycle addict. Okay, that's from Matt. Oh, my wife says good morning. And my mom says good morning. Oh, and before I forget, we always have to tell people continue to practice your social distancing, per Ed's mother. So, yes, thank you, Facebook. We'll see you guys on
Awesome.
Monday. And thank you, Natalie, for taking time out of your wooded current life situation.
Yes.
And
Yes. Thank you.
it's not too windy down here. It's like 5-mile-an-hour winds, so
Yeah.
a little bit less
Yeah.
windy than yesterday. So hopefully your bike
Yeah.
ride will be good today. So thank you, Facebook.
Hopefully.
We'll see you guys next week.